Patch 0.4 for Path of Exile 2 is just 4 days away from launching, and the headline feature for this update is the long-awaited Druid Class. This is arguably the most anticipated class to be added to the game, largely due to Shapeshifting. You'll be able to transform into a bear, a wolf, or a wyvern, and each transformer has its own strengths and weaknesses. But to shapeshift into one or several of these forms, you'll need to be equipped with a Talisman, which is a new two-handed weapon being introduced in this update. Now, there is something very important to note about the Druid and shapeshifting in Path of Exile 2, and this is something that has caused quite a bit of confusion, especially with players coming from other franchises like Diablo, and that is that you do not need to be a Druid to shapeshift. You can transform into any of these new forms on any class or ascendancy as long as you satisfy the requirements of the equipped Talisman. That means, for example, you could be a witch, ascended into a blood mage, and shapeshift into a bear if you wanted to, or you could be a wyvern shapeshifted pathfinder. The possibilities are many, and if you're coming from one of the other franchises, or if you're just new to the genre, you may be wondering what the point of the Druid class is then. Well, back at the launch of Path of Exile 2, this was a hot topic, revolving around the lack of any true minion ascendancy. But this was by design, because GGG wanted to avoid the scenario where minion builds would always gravitate towards the same class and the same ascendancy due to the power they provide for those specific builds, much like the Necromancer from PoE 1, which for many years had powerful notables for minion setups, to the point that choosing this class for those builds was pretty much a no-brainer. Another example from past Path of Exile 1 would be the old Saboteur with Trap and Mine builds. But it's clear that in Path of Exile 2 they want to avoid these situations by ensuring that ascendancies don't have options that cause them to be the obvious choice for particular archetypes. And so the Druid as a class and the ascendancies of the Druid will have themes that can support the types of playstyles that shapeshifting is trying to introduce. A good example of that is the Shaman's node that makes Rage also grant more spell damage, reinforcing the concept of a spell and attack hybrid build. But it's extremely unlikely that a Druid Ascendancy will grant access to nodes that essentially make it the go-to Ascendancy for any shapeshifting builds, as that's the exact scenario that they've tried so hard to avoid with minions. And this leads to something kind of interesting to think about: the idea that other classes and their Ascendancies may be better options for shapeshifting builds. In fact, there's two Ascendancies in particular that I think really stand out here. The first is the Titan. Now, the Titan's hulking form notable once again somehow managed to survive the patch notes. This is likely the single strongest Ascendancy notable in the game, and in patch 0.4 in particular, this node is getting a big buff in the form of hundreds of new passives in the Strength Intelligence area of the passive skill tree. Hulking form makes non-travel small passives have 50% increased effect, and there's going to be a lot of new options close to the warrior's start location on the tree to make good use of this node. Presumably, there will be a lot of new passives to support the shapeshifting archetype, either directly through buffs to each specific form, or just generic power while shapeshifted, and the Titan will be the ascendancy that can make the best use of these new passive tree options. Now, on top of hulking form, the Titan also has some very good supporting ascendancy options for the bear transform in particular. We know that the bear will have at least one slam attack, Ferocious Slam, and the Titan now has two different ascendancy branches that support slam attacks. One branch grants a 25% chance for your slams to cause aftershocks, and makes every second slam be ancestrally boosted for more damage and area of effect. And then there's another branch which has been massively buffed in 0.4. Previously, this was all about accelerating heavy stuns and granting more damage against heavy stun targets, and this will still be the case for the first node, which has essentially been consolidated from the two previous notables. But the branching notable, which is now a new node called Mountain Splitter, this one makes it so that every third slam causes 3 additional aftershocks, one in front of you and one on each side of you. So if you want to play a shapeshifting bear that's focused around slams, Titan is going to almost certainly be your best option in terms of ascendancy choice. Now, the other ascendancy that I want to mention here for its potential with shapeshifting is the Witchhunter. I do want to say that I'm not a big believer in a hybrid spell and attack build. I'm just not convinced that there's enough support available for this type of build where your damage output is roughly split evenly between the two. Instead, it's much more likely that one or the other ends up being the large majority of your damage. But regardless, if a hybrid spell and attack build is something that you want to achieve, then the Witchhunter's Weapon Master must be considered here. In 0.3, this notable was buffed big time, so that it just transforms all of your passive skill points into weapon set passives. And this means that you can, in theory, have two entirely different passive skill trees on each weapon swap. In reality, it's not going to work out quite like that due to the existence of dual sockets on the tree that you need to pass through, but you should be able to really specialize into spells on one set and attacks on the other if you want to try and enable this type of build. Now, somewhat similar to the Titan, the Witchhunter has some very good supporting nodes on the Ascendancy that are generic enough that they can be used to benefit many different builds, like the Concentration branch that was actually buffed quite a bit this patch, so that you'll be able to break enemy concentration faster, which means you can deal more damage faster. And there's also the changed Sorcery Ward if you want a more defensive option. This Aegis-like effect can now also defend against physical and chaos damage if you invest into the full branch, which is quite powerful if you have good armor or evasion scaling. Lastly, I'll briefly mention the Smith of Kitava, which is being buffed quite substantially in patch 0.4 after receiving some heavy nerfs in the previous update. The Smith of Kitava has very good defensive options that are extremely economical in a league start scenario. For example, the new heat proofing, which makes you unaffected by all damaging ailments, or the buffed internal layer to make you take 100% reduced extra damage from incoming critical hits. Or the fact that you'll now get quite a lot more base armor because the Smith's Masterwork will now provide a flat 200 per allocated node branching from it. These combined make the Smith of Kitava an interesting option as a league starter with a view to switching to Titan further into progression. However, there is also a very interesting new notable on this Ascendancy, Kitavan Imprint, which grants 60% increased glory generation. Now, we know that the Bear Shapeshift will have an ultimate-like ability called Walking Calamity, and this skill requires glory to use, so the idea that you can maintain this skill with higher uptime may be a reason in and of itself to choose the Smith of Kitava for a Bear-focused build. Now, in regards to the Druid Ascendancies, we currently only have the leaked Ascendancy images that came from old press kits, and we've heard that they're outdated. So we're expecting to get the full Ascendancy information for both the Shaman and the Oracle in the next few days, but I just wanted to make this video because as it currently stands, I believe other classes may have better options to support these kinds of archetypes. Thanks for watching this video, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.
Mm-hmm.